What if I told you that one of the most celebrated events in human history might not have happened at all? On July 20th, 1969, over 600 million people watched as Neil Armstrong stepped onto the moon and said those iconic words.
One giant leap for mankind.
But here's the thing, not everyone bought it. And the more you look into it, the more the questions start piling up. What if the moon landing was staged? What if it was all just a cover-up, a Hollywood-style production carefully crafted by the US government? Today, we're going to look at the facts, the footage, and the theory behind one of the most controversial questions in modern history. Did NASA fake the moon landing?
One giant leap. So, I guess you want to do it again. Okay.
To understand why anyone would even think of faking the moon landing, you need to understand the timing. The 1960s were intense. The US and the Soviet Union were in the middle of the Cold War, not just a military arms race, but a race to dominate space. The Soviets were winning. First satellite Sputnik, first man in space Yuri Gagarin, first spacewalk. America was lagging behind. So, in 1961, President Kennedy stepped up and made a bold promise.
Before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
Billions of dollars were funneled into NASA. The space program was under enormous pressure to deliver. But then disaster in 1967. The Apollo 1 mission ended in tragedy when a fire during testing killed all 3 astronauts on board.
Hey! Oh, don't fire in the cockpit! It's a bad fire!
NASA was shaken, the public lost confidence, and the theory goes, what if, after all that, someone decided it wasn't worth the risk of failure? What if they needed a win no matter what? And here's the part that makes people really think. Even today, with SpaceX and the most advanced technology on Earth, we see rockets fail, landings go wrong, and years of testing just to achieve low Earth orbit. Yet in 1969, with primitive computers and no prior experience, NASA pulled off a perfect round trip to the moon on the first try, live-streamed it from 240,000 miles away, and brought everyone home safely? It's not impossible, but for many, it raises eyebrows. Let's talk about one of the first things people point to, the American flag. In the moon landing footage, you see the flag waving. But hold on, the moon doesn't have an atmosphere. There's no wind. So why is the flag moving? NASA says it's because the astronauts twisted the flagpole while planting it. They even included a horizontal rod to keep the flag extended. But skeptics argue, the movement looks more like it's being affected by air, like it's on a set, inside a studio. And once you start noticing that, it's hard to unsee it. Another thing, there are no stars in any of the moon landing photos. None. The sky is just pure black. NASA says the camera's exposure was too low to capture the faint light of the stars. That makes sense until you think about it. These were high-end cameras for their time. The contrast between the bright moon surface and the stars should have shown something. And if this really was filmed on Earth in a studio, forgetting to add stars would have been an easy mistake to make. Now let's talk about shadows. On the moon, there's only one light source, the sun. So all shadows should fall in the same direction, right? But in the photos and videos, shadows go in multiple directions. Some are longer, some are shorter, some even curve. NASA says it's because of uneven terrain. But some people don't buy that. It looks like multiple light sources were used like stage lights. And on a movie set, that's exactly how you'd light a scene. Here's where things get even more interesting. In 1968, director Stanley Kubrick released 2001, A Space Odyssey. The visuals were stunning. Space scenes looked incredibly real even by today's standards. And just a year later, NASA supposedly pulled off the most visually perfect moon landing, with live video feeds from 240,000 miles away. Some conspiracy theorists believe Kubrick was hired by the government to help fake the moon landing. They even claim he left clues in The Shining, like the famous scene where the kid wears an Apollo 11 sweater and walks into room 237. Why room 237? Because the average distance from Earth to the moon is roughly 237,000 miles. Is that just a coincidence? Or was Kubrick trying to confess something through his film? Between Earth and the moon is the Van Allen radiation belt, an area of intense radiation that surrounds our planet. The Apollo astronauts would have had to fly through it. But here's the issue. Radiation at that level is dangerous. Without proper shielding, it could cause serious harm. NASA says the astronauts passed through quickly, and the exposure time was low. But some scientists argue that even brief exposure would have been risky, especially with the thin aluminum shielding Apollo spacecraft had. It raises the question, could they really have passed through safely? Or did they avoid it by never going in the first place? To be fair, NASA has answered these claims. The flag, supported by a rod. The stars, camera limitations. The shadows, uneven ground. The radiation, not enough time for it to matter. But for a lot of people, it's not just the answers, it's the feeling that something's off. It's about trust. And when people lose trust in big institutions, every explanation sounds like an excuse. And once you start doubting, it's hard to stop. So, did we actually go to the moon? There's no way to know for sure unless new evidence comes to light. But the fact that so many people question it even decades later says something. In an age of misinformation, deep fakes, and media control, the idea that the government could fake something big doesn't seem so far-fetched anymore. Maybe the truth is out there, or maybe we've just never left the sound stage. So, what do you think? Was it an incredible scientific achievement? Or one of the greatest lies ever told? Drop your theories in the comments. I read every single one. And if you thought this was wild, wait till you hear about the Black Knight satellite, an object that's been orbiting Earth for over 13,000 years and nobody knows what it is. Click here to watch that next.